Hi, I'm Alison Warner, founder of Evolve and Grow and author of Build and Grow. Welcome to the Evolve and Grow podcast show, where I share lots of useful tips and advice to tradespeople who are looking to move off the tools and grow a really successful business. So I'm delighted to be joined this afternoon by Lorraine Bridges, who is Director of Bear PR and has looked after my PR for several years. And I've invited Lorraine on really to share her insights into construction and trades as a consumer. Just a little bit of background on Lorraine. She is one of only 200 chartered PR practitioners in the UK. Her background, which encompasses 20 years of experience in the industry, includes being the comms manager at the NHS, leading the response to swine flu across South London. She has recently led a project to increase uptake of the COVID vaccine, and she was also part of the media team for the London 2012 Olympics. So some really, really strong experience in PR. So I'm delighted to have her on as a guest this afternoon. Welcome, Lorraine.
Thanks, Alison. Lovely to be here. And thanks for such a kind introduction.
So perhaps a good starting place, I know how this came about, this discussion, is perhaps you could share your experience as a customer with trade. So we'll look at both the negative experiences that you've had and also the positives, because I think that, you know, this discussion can hopefully get some people thinking about it a little bit differently in terms of how they run their business and the kinds of impressions that you can sometimes unwittingly create. And so, yeah, what has been your experience in the main when you've needed a tradesperson?
In the main, sadly, and, you know, for no disrespect to the people listening, my experience has been quite poor, quite negative, which, you know, is a shame. There have been some really positive experiences I've had, but I think generally I haven't had the best experiences with the trades that I've needed, you know, for my home.
And what sort of things, can you give some examples of sort of typical things that you tend to have experienced?
Typical things. I mean, I think this is something that will probably resonate with quite a few people, but, you know, I think one of the most frustrating things is, you know, when you need, whether it's a plumber or an electrician, there's usually, you know, a sense of urgency. You need that person to be on site quite quickly. So, you know, it's very frustrating when, you're not kind of given, a clear time frame of when that person might be arriving. They don't turn up. They arrive very late. But you're not aware of that, you know, or there's just no communication from them whatsoever. And these are not uncommon examples, really. And, you know, whether it's the weekend or not, time is really precious. And I think even at the moment when so many people are working from home and that's increased, there's also disruption to your working day. Maybe if you're trying to juggle your meetings online with a potential visit, there's also a lot more to think about there. So it's generally just not being given clear information about when someone's coming. And I think just, you know, it's a bit like when you get a food shop delivery, they always give you an hour slot, don't they? And they might arrive at the beginning of that slot or at the end. But, you know, something as simple like that could make a difference. And just the not knowing is disruptive and it can feel disrespectful as well.
Yeah. So communication would definitely be something that, and that's often in any business, isn't it? Be it large or small, and regardless of the industry, whether it's communicating with your customer or with your team, it's something that I think a lot of businesses do struggle with. But, you know, there are some great systems out there that can automate a lot of those processes. What sort of other things would you say you have experienced?
I think some of the other things something like first impression is really important. So, just the basic kind of, when you open the door, someone sort of, introduces themselves and their company to you, polite, courteous, asks if, do you want them to remove their shoes? Things like that, that instant first impression, when they come into your house, because, for trades, they've been in and out of people's houses all day, but it's not every day you have a stranger in your house. And if you're in the house alone as a woman as well, there's obviously that consideration. So you want to be made to feel at ease straight away. And I think the other thing is about listening to the customer. I think where I've had bad experiences where they haven't really listened to what the problem is. They just kind of make a beeline straight away to the boiler and or whatever it is. And, sometimes you just want that moment to kind of explain in your own words what the problem is, and for them to sort of give you an outline of what they're about to do, rather than just get their head down. And that doesn't, there's not a lot of communication. And I've really liked it when, you sort of hear the horror stories about people going to get their car MOT'd and, people trying to bamboozle you with jargon and things like that. And I'm actually someone who wants to know a bit about the job they're about to do, what they're going to do, teach me a little bit about the appliance in my home. I mean, not everyone will want that. For me, that is important. And then I think I've had sort of a couple of, I had someone come to the house who, was fixing the boiler and decided to relieve themselves in my downstairs loo with the door wide open, which was obviously a new one. So I think it sort of goes back to that, that's obviously a strange thing to do, but maybe people just kind of forget where they are sometimes, because, as I say, they're in and out of houses all the time, and it's just, it's part and parcel for daily job for them. But it's, you're in someone's home, and so just be always mindful of that, and, tidy and, sort of, good hygiene. And I think even now, although COVID is very much out of the headlines, I still feel it is important for, and again, being polite to sort of ask the question, would you like me to wear a mask? You don't know if that person has vulnerable, if there's other vulnerable people living in that house, for example. So I think it's just being considerate on so many levels. Yeah.
Yeah, quite. So on the flip side of that, and this is kind of how we ended up having this discussion today, isn't it? That you'd recently had some really good experiences. So tell me a bit more about what happened.
Yeah. I think when you have a good experience, sadly, it seems to be sort of quite a rarity. I think generally across the board in customer service. And so when something good happens, it's so kind of, it makes you want to tell people about it as well. And so I had sort of, the one that sort of stands out for me is recently, I've had a lot of problems with my boiler, as you can tell. I had someone come round and again, straight away, was very, very friendly and welcoming, started out with a conversation about, what are the different issues I'd had, not just sort of like the last week, but previously. So he wanted a bit of a background. I didn't feel rushed at all. And I immediately tried to kind of teach me a little bit about the boiler, because I was a problem with the pressure. So he showed me how to correct that in future. So there was an element straight away of me feeling that, this wasn't someone that was going to rip me off. This was someone that was actually interested in giving me a bit of advice, so that I didn't have to call someone out again unnecessarily. So that was really, really refreshing. He talked to me quite a lot about how the boiler worked and the various things that could go wrong. So I found that quite kind of empowering, really. And then he was quite sort of upfront and said, look, this boiler is quite old. I wouldn't be spending huge amounts of money on this. These are the options in terms of what I can do for you today. It just kept me informed every step of the way, and then said, I need to call the manufacturer now. put the phone on speaker so I could hear the conversation, which I thought was really good. Nice touch, very open and transparent. So there was that. And I sort of didn't feel, I think sometimes I can feel that this is a sort of gripe I have often, is that people try to upsell things to you, additional services, additional parts that don't feel needed, or they can't explain to you why something's needed. And with this guy, it was completely the opposite. I just felt that there was that sense of honesty from the start. Again, very clean and tidy, which definitely helped, which was definitely nice.
Because I guess it's a positive first impression, exactly. Because what you're talking about there is he's built, I'm assuming it's a he, he's building trust with you, but it's a very subtle thing, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, if that trust hadn't been built and somebody said, look, I think you need a new boiler, you could see that in a negative light. But because he had given you good information up until that point, and he was clean and tidy and respectful and all the rest of it, you had trusted him. And so your perception there is he's being honest and transparent and giving you good advice and allowing you to make your own decision, I guess, as to which way you wanted to go.
I didn't feel kind of passive at all in this conversation or this kind of experience. It was all about, I felt sort of part of everything, whereas sometimes, again, I think you just feel like, someone comes in, tells you what needs doing. That's kind of it. Off they go. This was so much more of a conversation. And yes, you're right, he did build rapport with me. And actually, it just reminded me that even before he did turn up, he did give me a clear time frame. And then I think it was 10 or 20 minutes before he came, he gave me another call just to double check that the time was still convenient. It's a simple thing, but I don't think that's ever happened before when I've had things a job doing.
A lot of you're probably aware of it working in PR, but there's a great book called Influence: The Power of Persuasion by Robert Cialdini. Don't know if you've come across that, but he did some research into why people were taken in by con men and what it was that they were doing. Intelligent people that were being taken in, and there was the 6 what he calls principles of influence. I'm sure I'm preaching to the converted here, you'll be aware of it, but it's just reminded me of that, because what you've touched on there, there's 2 things. One is reciprocity. He gave you information and advice for free, effectively, without expecting anything in return. And the second one is commitment and consistency. So he's done what he said he was going to do. So it's that whole, I'm 10 minutes away and then he arrives at your doorstep type. It's just that subtle thing that, you could say, I'm 10 minutes away and arrive an hour late. It would be destroyed. Or you could not maybe communicate at all and just turn up late. All of those things are chipping away at the trust, aren't they? And forming an impression, which are so subtle, and people, might think, well, I was held up on another job. It doesn't matter. It's about keeping the customer informed and doing what you say you're going to do. And because it is very subtle. And it also brought to mind, and, we talk about it all of the time, and it's not just construction and trades. This happens in other industries as well. But effectively, you can end up doing a job that you haven't been trained to do. And by that, what I mean is, I'm guessing that when trades do their training, you're not taught any sort of selling skills or building rapport, how to build relationships with your customers, because it is very subtle. The 2 examples that you've talked about, it's, would you recommend that it's worth anybody really who's got a business investing in themselves and learning those sorts of skills?
Oh gosh, absolutely. I think for some people it will obviously come more naturally than others, but I do think certainly in terms of selling, having a conversation about what parts you might need or what service you might need and all of that. You're right. There was a way to do that, and there's nothing that turns me off more than knowing that they're just doing it to hit the targets, or, you know, because you're a small job, so therefore they want to get more out of it. You can kind of see that a mile off, and you can see when it's false. And yet, with this example, I don't know, is this a level of this is straightforward, honest information he's giving me, and I think, yeah, there's probably some techniques certainly that could be used and could be learned, definitely, to sort of make that conversation feel less salesy and more, you know, don't know, more a conversation with the customer, as I said. So yeah, I think definitely, I think these are things, there's probably lots of areas where trades can think about, you know, personal development. I also think another thing this company did really well is, even after they left and got the sent me the invoice, it wasn't just an invoice, it was actually a kind of summary of everything he'd done and the conversation we had and the advice he'd given me, you know. So I've advised this customer to do in future. So there's that level of accountability there as well. You know, it's not just a transactional, oh, here's the invoice, you know, we need the money now. This is again, it's a kind of a record of what took place. And I really liked that. Again, very simple.
Which built trust. Again, yeah, and didn't cost them anything. I mean, a little bit of extra time, perhaps, but you know, that's often these things don't. It's a nice touch. Often these things are very subtle and they're small, but they make a huge difference. They set you apart from your competition.
Yeah, and the message it gave me as well is, I've heard you, I've listened to you, and I've heard you, and I think that's the general message feeling that he gave me.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, for some people, it's not necessarily how do you sell in an authentic way. It can sometimes be confidence as well. So I often hear the opposite, where people don't want to appear too pushy, and therefore they don't offer what they could be offering that the customer would really benefit from. You know, they're worried about overstepping the mark or appearing a salesy person. So, but it comes down to that same thing. I know I invested when I went out on my own. I definitely invested in myself, and because I've never had to market myself or sell a product. My background was one where I was comfortable managing people and P&Ls, but the sales and marketing piece was completely alien. So, you know, all of these things can be learnt, can't they? Some, as you say, it'll be more natural than others. Some people will feel more comfortable with it than others, but it can be
I think it's about remembering as well. It's like, don't go in cold, you know, don't just do this cold sell on someone. It wouldn't work on any circuit. It doesn't, you know, cold calling doesn't really work. Knocking on someone's door to door sales doesn't work anymore. It's intrusive. It jars with the customer. And I think that's the sort of the thing to bear in mind, is that you can't just go straight in with that sell. You've got to, you know, she said, gain the trust, have a conversation, build up to it.
Making me think of a call I got and of one of a number in recent weeks from my mobile phone service provider, and it's an interruption to your day. Why do you think it is that some of the industry have unfortunately earned a less than good reputation?
I think it's probably down to the fact that we all need trades all the time. You know, it's a service that everyone has used and needed at some point in their life. And so there's sort of, you know, it's ubiquitous in that way, but also, people talk about it, you know, they will, you know, if it's something you're getting a sort of, I don't know, a problem in your home and something's gone wrong and you're frustrated and you haven't got any heating, whatever it is, you'll talk to your friends about it, you'll talk to your family about it, because it affects your daily life so much. You know, it's a really big thing and can be quite distressing and all of that. So you talk about it. So I think it's just one of those. So I think it's happened because of word of mouth, and naturally, you know, people having a bad experience, they do sort of let off steam. And I think then the stereotype around trades kind of, just gathers steam and it just kind of snowballs and all of that. And I've seen a lot of social media where people have kind of had their various gripes about trades, and then that kind of sets off a whole chain of comments and things. And I guess everyone at some point probably has had a bad experience that they still remember, and that still maybe costs them a lot of money or a lot of pain. So So I think some of it is actually based on experience and the fact that we, as I said, our homes are so important to us. So if something goes wrong, we do tend to feel it very deeply.
Yeah. And potentially, I suppose, I'm just thinking, generally a trade will only operate in your local area as well. And so it goes around that local area very quickly. Whereas if it's a big company, it's a bit more faceless, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially these days, people are much more likely to kind of check someone out online and see what people are saying about them before they use them. So it's very, very, very important. I think as well, I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of people that will disagree with me, but I wonder whether a sense of complacency has set in with some people in the trades, and that there isn't a shortage of business really. And when you have that demand that's there, that's kind of always going to be there, has poor standards set in, because even if they don't turn up and that customer is a myth, does it matter? There's just another one around the corner, so I wonder whether there's an element of that as well. But I think that's obviously that's a big mistake. It's certainly in this climate. It's certainly in this world that we live in.
And I think, from my perspective, I think it's not necessarily that people don't care. Quite the opposite, actually. In a lot of cases, they very much do. But because they haven't had that training in everything that we've been talking about, how to sell effectively, how to build relationships and build trust. You don't know what you don't know. And then coupled with the fact of this huge demand, especially at the moment, a lot of these guys and girls are just massively overwhelmed. And so it's not their intention, but unfortunately, if they've grown too quickly or they haven't got the right infrastructure in place, that sadly can be the end result. What advice would you give to somebody who's listening who owns a trade business, who really wants to focus on creating a good impression? What sort of tips could you give?
I think about every single kind of touch point or interaction that you have with the customer. As I said, kind of when the customer first makes contact, how you respond, how you keep the person updated before you arrive. As I said, every moment, every interaction within the home once you're there, being respectful of what that person might, they're trying to juggle, as I said, working from home as well as showing you where things are and how, responding to questions and all of that. I think it's just break down every single step and think about how you can enhance it.
We do something called the customer journey, but actually it's probably more from the system and process aspect and that whole, just talking it through, that whole piece around actually when you're in the customer's home and breaking it down even further. And I always say, think about how you could exceed expectations, how you could wow expectations, because as we've said, people talk. And so if people have had a great experience, they'll shout about it as well. And that, that's very powerful marketing, isn't it? So what kind of simple things, in addition to that, could someone listening to this do instantly that might set them apart from their competition?
I think it's about these days when I'm looking for a trade, And what I've realised is I very, very rarely use the same trade twice. So that tells a story in itself. But for me now, I've noticed that if I'm looking for a trade, I'll always ask friends and family for recommendations. I'll always do the sort of checks online to see what people are saying about them, check out their website, that kind of thing. But the one thing I always do is I always go onto the social media channels, always. It might be because of my I work in PR, so, but that to me is where the truth lies, is what I see, what people are putting on social media. And I don't want to see the polished, glossy photographs and all of that. I want to see kind of what their interactions are like online, how, the kind of authentic side of their business, that kind of thing. And that will usually tip it for me.
If somebody has had a bad comment, would you say it's a good thing for the business owner to respond on social media? And if so, how? What sort of things should they be thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, I know people are sort of quite nervous and unsure sometimes about how to respond to bad comments online. And, I'd be more worried if there weren't any bad comments at all. If I see something that's very sanitized and whatever, what concerns me more, to be honest. So, the things that you have to do is acknowledge the comment, and, sort of say that you've, first of all, kind of acknowledge the comment, say that you've heard, you hear what they say, and then sort of say what the next steps will be in trying to kind of resolve the issue that they might have raised, and and be open and say, look, please. I think one of the things I quite like to see is, quite often I see companies saying, oh, I'm sorry to hear you've had a bad experience. Please contact us to let us know how you can help. But I think sometimes it's nice to give a choice to the customer. Would you like us to phone you? Or, not to just put the onus back on the customer all the time. But I think in the first step, you just need to sort of acknowledge the comment. Don't ignore it. Definitely don't delete it. And follow up, because...
And don't get defensive. Because I've seen that as well. I've seen, sorry to hear you've had a bad experience. We understand that, and then get into this rant. And I think, oh no, that's worse than not responding at all.
Yes, I have seen comments responses where people have tried to minimize what the customer has said, or tried to deny it happened, or just get very take it personally. And I think, especially if you're quite a small business and you're a one-person band, that's quite an easy thing to do, actually take something really personally. But it's always good to remember that people usually are a little bit more emotional online, or they can say things they would never say. So things can feel a little bit more amplified. So I think it's good to remain calm and give a polite but kind of polite response, but a tone that shows that you are that you want to resolve the situation.
Absolutely, yeah. To remain calm, and I think a good piece of advice is don't react there and then. If you're feeling annoyed by it, because a lot of people do take great pride in their business, and it can hurt, is just to sleep on it and then respond and take the emotion out of it as much as possible.
Yeah, that's a really good tip, actually. We talk about that a lot in PR, about not kind of, about, if you're not sure what to say straight away, then, you can give a holding response or something. But yeah, don't just give a knee-jerk reaction, because it's often not the right reaction, especially if you are... I don't know, maybe you're in your van and you see it on your phone and you've had a bad day, just pause. And also it's always a good idea to get a second opinion and see, like, is this, does this,
yeah, that's good advice. But I like your advice around saying, something to the effect of, we want to resolve this, we want to understand more, whatever it is, what's the best way to contact you? Because then, out there in the world on social media, people can see that you're professional, you are responsive, but actually you're taking the nitty gritty offline. And I always think it's best to try and have the conversation in person, don't hide behind email. Emails can be read time and time again and interpreted in different ways, and it can escalate and add fuel to the fire. Whereas if you just get somebody on the phone, it's just you and them, you can allow them to have their rant, get it off their chest, and then say, right, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm hearing. I need to go away and look into this, or whatever it is. But you're then professional, you're assertive, you're taking control.
Yeah, I think the phone idea is a really, really good one, because actually these days people do screenshot emails and put them on social media if they're not happy. So once something's written down, it can, travel around half the world before you know it.
Absolutely. That's right. It can go viral. And how can PR help a trades business, and what's the difference between PR and marketing? Because I think a lot of people do get confused.
I think part of the confusion is that PR and marketing have that there is quite a bit of overlap, and certainly that overlap has grown since the prevalence of digital and social media. But I think for me, the key difference is marketing tends to be very much about the transaction. It's very transactional. It's about sales and lead generation, pipelines and things like that. So that's, in a nutshell, really what marketing is about. The PR is more about it's about what I call the 3 R's. Actually, I call it reputation, relationships, and reality. And reality is one that people may not always associate with PR, because people will think, oh, PR is just putting a positive spin on things, or it's putting a gloss on something. But for me, PR is very, very much about the reality of your business, being authentic, and people will, how you put your company across in terms of all your interactions with your customers, your conversations with them online and offline, the things that you stand for. People will go on social media and they'll see straight away kind of what your values are and what you stand for, because it will be evident in all your communication. These are the things that are PR, essentially. It's a lot about, it's the added value really that you provide to your customer. And a lot of that these days is around, content, for example. So sort of going back to the company I used, actually, one of the things I really liked about them, and again, it's probably one of the reasons why I picked up the phone in the end, as I went online, I could see they'd already posted quite a few kind of how-to videos, which again may mean that I don't actually need to call them out anymore, because that content is there. But that just showed me that it's not just about selling for them. It's about giving me something of value, building trust, building relationships. Content is and content creation is absolutely vital to that these days. So the other thing I'd say is the key difference is about kind of profile. What PR can do is really elevate a company's profile. And I think if you're quite ambitious and you want to grow your business really fast, that's really important. So, you can do that by, traditional methods, for example, trying to get media coverage locally or nationally. But it could be kind of looking at your own personal brand and really becoming a leader in your field as a tradesperson, and doing lots of webinars online, or I don't know, selfie clips, and having views and putting yourself out there and being really active on social as the business owner and as in your own right. And that's where I've seen businesses really, really, really take off. It's because people get an understanding of what this business is about, what it stands for. And a lot of that is communicated through PR and PR services, so media, social media.
And you're showing your expertise in your field as well, in an area that most of us, even, I've worked with trades for 8 years, but I've learned a little bit about how boilers work and the building industry. But essentially most of us are, it's a whole grey area, isn't it? we don't know. And so,
and
there's a real opportunity there to show your expertise.
Yeah, and it does make companies really stand out these days, because it's, anyone can have a good website these days and all of that. And those kind of things are sort of pretty standard, but PR is not something that's kind of easy. And if you don't get it right, people will see the cracks immediately. They'll see through it. So it's all about your authentic communications and your reputation. Like you said, your local reputation can be ruined in an instant. But conversely, you could build a really, really positive reputation through PR locally that will probably accelerate your business like nothing else. And it's about standing out and being different and knowing, so your customers know exactly why you're different. It's hard in a trades business because it's a very, very crowded marketplace. But we've seen it.
It is, but I don't think many of them are using the services of a PR agency, and so there is an opportunity there. And so that kind of nicely leads me into, should if anyone be listening who wants to, take the discussion further, what's the best way to find out more about you and to get in touch?
I'd say visit our website, so bearpr.co.uk. There's different ways you can get in touch on there. You can get in touch also via any of our social media channels. You can drop us a message or DM on there. So if anyone wants to chat about PR, it's one of my obviously areas of passion, so I could talk about it all day.
Absolutely. That's great. Well, really interesting discussion, Lorraine. Thank you very much for coming on the show and giving up your time and sharing some really useful advice and tips. I know they will be of great interest to our audience. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
I really hope you have enjoyed today's podcast. I would love to invite you to join our Trades and Builders Business Growth Group on Facebook, where I regularly share lots of information to help you create a more successful trades business. You can also order a copy of my book, Build and Grow, which is available on Amazon.